Welcome, welcome to the Global Conscious Parenting Assembly. Again, I really appreciate that you all took the time to watch this new episode of my wonderful guest, David Arell. David, welcome to the assembly.
Thank you for having me here today, Corinne. I greatly appreciate your invitation and look forward to our conversation here and sharing my contributions to what does it mean to be more conscious as a father, but then also as parents in general.
Thank you. I'm so proud to have you on board. And in fact, I was looking forward for quite some time because we are going to talk about the topic conscious fatherhood today. However, before we begin, I would like to ask you the same question I ask all my guests, namely, who are you and how has been your journey through your life that leads you to be sitting here in front of me talking about conscious fatherhood?
Thank you. It's a great way to kick off our conversation. Um, I sometimes talk that by trade, I'm an executive coach and consultant. I work with a lot of high performers, men and women, all across professional space, helping them figure out what does their career growth look like for them, what are their leadership opportunities, how to step up and show up to be better leaders, both for their current teams, but also for themselves and going forward. And I noticed as I was getting more involved in working with people and hearing about some of their familial challenges, that the challenges of parenthood were pretty often a topic, even if we were explicitly meeting to connect about the professional development. So I started connecting more about these challenges, but then finding out that me and my wife were pregnant into our first pregnancy, I had the visceral experience of living through the journey from what I call the dude zone as a guy in a relationship to the dad zone as now I am a parent. And I struggled mightily all throughout that journey. I didn't really feel I was getting good cultural support. I really didn't feel like I was being seen and appreciated in my own journey. I felt like I was treated as an accessory to my wife's pregnancy, not necessarily intentionally or like pejoratively, but just everybody focused on her and the pregnancy and the baby, which is expected, but I was often an afterthought if I was even addressed at all. And so my own experience of going into fatherhood was a lot of challenges, both on our culture, but also my efforts on how to be a great partner, how to be a great dad to my newborn. And so I learned a lot of things through trial and error. I spoke with a lot of people. And a lot of things, frankly, I discovered what I felt was the hard way. And that if somebody had told me this earlier, I would have started here versus grasping at straws and like struggling and having difficult experiences for myself, but also for my wife and her pregnancy journey. I wanted to be a great partner, but I didn't feel like I had the tools or the tips or some helpful advice from men and women around me that were landing that were going to help me show up better connected to her and better prepared for what's coming up. So that's kind of where my Welcome to Fatherhood project, it's a passion project. It's a niche within my larger coaching work that came, the source of that was my experience with my clients, but then my own lived reality, and then being able to speak more authentically about that fatherhood journey and the journey to parenthood for mothers as well, and be able to connect with individuals who have personal, professional, and familial challenges by really being able to focus here in this niche on what does it mean to be a more conscious father and why is that so important? So I'm again grateful to be able to connect with you and your audience here and share my thinking and my work in that realm.
Thank you very much. So much needed. This work is so much needed. But before we go into our conversation, I would like to set the tone for this conversation by presenting actually the latest findings of about fatherhood of the evolutionary anthropologist Dr. Anna Matchin. She is teaching at the university and researching at the University of Oxford, and she has spent more than 15 years on researching about the role of fathers in our human evolution. Well, just to educate our audience and ourselves, it's so interesting what she found out. And this is what she found out. So about 750, 100 years ago, a long, long time ago, human males had many, many kids. So they only invested in reproductive success, not into their offspring. So that changed some 500,000 years ago through the fact that we became bipedal and through the increasing intake of protein. So that had the effect that our brains went bigger and bigger and bigger. So they became so big and that too big for our anatomy and to give birth through the normal birth canal of the woman. So they had to give birth earlier to the babies ahead of time, only after 9 months, as we know, with the result that the babies were totally helpless. So actually, if we take into consideration our weight, our height, we should be pregnant as long as an elephant with our babies, but we can't. So the babies are helpless, needed much more care. And well, there was the women in the beginning helped each other, but after 300,000 years, 250,000 100 years, the reproductive process was almost coming to zero. So we didn't reproduce enough anymore to multiply and we were at the point of extinction. That is what Anna Machin argues. The human race would have been extinct if the fathers would not have stepped into place. So evolution has selected for those men who stuck around and started investing in their offspring and helped with child rearing. So this process is called, it has a name, I was really astonished, male parental investment. And the abbreviation for it in biology is MPI. And MPI is very, very rare in mammals. 95% of mammals have no MPI. So we belong to the 5% with MPI. So the role of father would not have evolved unless his role was not really needed. So in this case, his role was critical for survival for our species. Isn't that interesting?
That's amazing. It's always good to get more current research and more, helpful theories to better situate us in our reality, but also to create more empathy and appreciation for the idea that this is relatively new if you look at our millions of years of evolution. And so many of the guys that I work with, I call the dad instinct. They automatically think about their baby as like a 3-year old. Like that's how I used to start my workshops when I used to do these in person, is what are you most excited about with your baby? And they would tell me stories about fixing bikes and going fishing. And I would nod and be like, so how old is your newborn in these pictures? And you would see them all be like, oh, like 3. So that idea of connecting with and being fully involved and present for their babies, they still tend to start with the baby as magically 3 years old. And I would say, well, look, there's 1,000 days and nights between when your baby's born and this imagination. So I'm going to help you close that gap and get you heavily invested and engaged from minute one. Or even backing up now, your partner's a mom now. She's pregnant now. She's a mom. You may think you're not going to be a dad until baby gets here, but let's start acting as an engaged parent here today and more so going forward.
You touch on something also Anna Metchin found out, that she found out that women, of course, bond via hormones with the baby, while fathers do that with interaction.
Mm-hmm.
This phase to be able to interact with a child takes a long time. And so the father is set on hold for a longer time, I guess, huh? But
Indeed.
just to start our conversation from the beginning, what do you mean when you talk about conscious fatherhood? What does the term mean for you?
So in my Welcome to Fatherhood work, I specifically use conscious fatherhood, and I use conscious to mean two specific things. One, a greater awareness of where you are in this journey and what's going on, what's at stake, what's the reality around you, what your partner's going through, what she's looking to you to support, where she may be looking at different things, and what the actual journey is. But then the second part of the awareness is the engagement. Like, what does it mean to show up and step up? What does it mean to connect with your partner? You're on different journeys. She's a mom now. You'll be a dad later when baby gets here. So you're on different journeys. Let's honor that fact But then let's build bridges of connection across that journey so that you can show up and better connect with her on her journey. You can show up better prepared for what's happening now and what's going to be happening soon at each stage of this journey, from that positive pregnancy test through the trimesters, through childbirth, through that fourth trimester or beyond, when baby needs parents for everything. And also in that relationship building all along, you're going to be parents together, even if during pregnancy, she's a mom now and you're not quite there yet. But what does that collaborative relationship building look like as parents? And it's different, as I alluded to earlier, in the dude zone before you have babies until when you are a parent and now you're in the dad zone. And how do we thrive as fathers in the dad zone? So that aspiration for thriving through consciousness, awareness plus engagement is the way I tend to approach it, to really help them appreciate the opportunity that fatherhood is presenting and inspire them to show up and step up in more meaningful ways.
Yeah. Actually, we all are infused with cultural narratives and norms around, as you touched already, motherhood and fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
Big one is that motherhood is instinctive and fathers have to learn it from scratch. Mothers also have to learn it from scratch. Well, and both are instinctive, right? But often the reality is that everything mom does is seen as a gold standard, right? When it comes to parenting, um, when it comes to parenting, which in my perspective undermines quite a lot the man's confidence. So that's one challenge, for instance, I see that men have to deal with. What are common challenges that all men have to face in fatherhood, in your opinion?
Well, I'll speak to exactly the point you're just making, and the one that the researcher you cited a moment ago was also talking about. And that's what in my work, it's dad tip number 27. Fathers don't mother. We are going to show up differently. Mothers, as you mentioned, really feel that engagement, that connection, that visceral oxytocin loops of like, this is my baby, when they're snuggling, when they're gazing at their baby, when they're sniffing their head. And when you ask expectant moms, what are you most excited about? They say, when I can meet my baby. Men, on the other hand, stimulate those same bonding loops, those same oxytocins, that same viscerally felt connection with my baby through play, through engagement, through interaction. So there is going to be a certain unfairness if men are being judged according to the degree they're doing what women are doing. So fathers don't mother is how I try to highlight and then put some deeper light into the differences and encourage people to appreciate these differences, but also more importantly, appreciate the differences with their backgrounds, with their cultural training, with their actual training, with their experience with babies and newborns. And so, a way I really try to help parents together to bridge these gaps across that journey, across the expectations, across the divide, and this is where I speak specifically to men, is I encourage them to look to find ways to step into parenthood right away. Like when baby's born, obviously give mama the first 1 hour of skin to skin, that golden hour. But then I encourage the dads, jump right in there, take your shirt off, get naked baby on your chest, get your skin to skin, really bond with baby and start cultivating an appreciation for building what I call shared agreements. How are we going to hold baby? How are we going to change baby? How are we going to feed baby? How are we going to do these things? So rather than looking to follow mama's lead, as you mentioned, there's some instinctual elements there, but a lot of it's also learned.
Mhm.
She's struggling too. So for dads, don't just wait and then see and then guess and then be feels a certain way about the way mama might be watching you, or she's hovering and she's concerned when you're with baby. You can work around all that by starting with an open sense of curiosity and appreciation that she may not know also. So rather than how are you doing it, or I want to do it this way, reorient with more awareness and engagement, more consciousness, and create that curiosity. How are we going to do this? Let's try it this way. What do you think about this? So as that shared agreement framework starts to solidify, and you can start on this today, working to get unexpressed hopes and unshared expectations out into consciousness, into awareness, and then engage it with that curiosity and build those shared agreements. Now that's a framework of connection and collaboration that can bake into that relationship now as parents. and support those challenges and that growth as you all are moving forward here together. So that's a specific way to address that I really like to emphasize, especially for, again, this can happen. Your kids can be 10 and you can start shifting the conversations over to shared agreements versus continually battling about unexpressed hopes or unshared expectations.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you also made a good point that, especially in young children when they are 0 to 3 years, so the mother is the gold standard, and often fathers are very insecure and
Hmm.
are criticized by culture and surroundings. Well, take more charts and be a good father and be the rock. And, that's a common word that's always coming into my ear. So, what can men do to shift their relationship to fatherhood from one of obligation and responsibility into more opportunity and engagement? What can they do in those opportunities?
Well,
Oh,
yeah, and first thing I want to speak to here, Corinne, is what you mentioned that fatherhood is full of responsibilities and obligations. I don't want to minimize that side of things because that's what so many of the guys that I connect with as new parents when they're struggling, that's what they're feeling the weight of. They're sort of burdened by and overwhelmed with all of these responsibilities. And they'll tell me, I get up, I do whatever I can to help with mom and the baby. I go to work, works hard. I still got to show up as a team member or as a leader in my company and produce. And then I come home. As soon as I get home, it's right back to family mayhem. And I do this, so you didn't do it right. It's all of that. So
yeah.
there is a reality there, and that's where I want to make sure we honor that. But then this is where the invitation is like, okay, guys, every superhero's journey starts with being challenged. And the formative moment is when you pivot in that challenge and you step up and you decide to make a choice. So, what's the choice you're going to make when being confronted by these challenges? How are you going to choose to take ownership over what you're bringing to this situation or what you're not bringing? And where can you lean in and start to have an influence on the situation and take ownership of your ability to respond to the challenges rather than be overwhelmed or react and be burdened by them? So, in my dad's zone thriving, I try to balance an awareness of these responsibilities, these challenges, and encourage them to cultivate that curiosity with their partner to that lean into that relationship and bring more consciousness to the conversation of what is our relationship. I like to talk about bouncing forward. How are we going to bounce forward here as parents rather than how are we going to bounce back to the way we were? There's no bouncing back. Newsflash. You're going to bounce forward. So have that conversation with your partner.
Can you
Support
give an
her
example?
effort.
Can
I'm
you give
sorry, go ahead.
can you give an example of what you just described? This bouncing back or this bouncing forward?
Yeah, so many of the guys that I mentioned we start in the dude zone. We have our relationship, we have our job, but then we have all the other things that really make us who we are. We like watching football or playing basketball or playing golf or soccer, as you Europeans call it, football. And we have the things that we really feel connected to and our friendships, our personal growth, our going to the gym, our self-care. And this is a big chunk of our lives. And this is the dude zone. But when you get to the dad zone, having your child, having a baby is not a small plus one 9 pound addition on the side. It's like a bomb going off in your entire life. And so many guys are thinking, again, incorrectly. This is where the consciousness comes in. Oh, I'm going to just help now so I can get back to the way my life used to be, or also with their partner, the way we used to be. When are we going to get back? So they're orienting 180 degrees in the wrong direction. So
Mm.
they're trying to drag their dude zone activities and their dude zone allocation of time, effort, money, etc. It's like you're not going skiing in the Alps this year. That's just not happening. You're not bouncing back to that. And that's okay. So let's intentionally own this reality and step up and let's make a choice about bouncing forward and engage our partners. And what does our relationship look like now as parents? And can we bring a percentage of these dude zone activities or engagements forward? What's a minimum reasonable expectation for taking care of ourselves, our self-care routines, our health, our wellness, our personal growth? let's make sure we preserve that, but let's preserve it in an appreciation awareness of the new reality of the dad zone. So it may be new relationship dynamics. Maybe you don't go skiing in the Alps. You go for a walk around the corner, or maybe, but what's the reality here? And then stepping up in that reality and connecting with your partner with curiosity. And how do you see our relationship changing? We used to do this all the time, and that's not really available now, and that's okay. But how can we bond here today and look to the future to do something else that's more suitable for bringing our baby with us? Maybe we don't go scuba diving, but we take a cruise, or like, what is the new version that we
Mhm.
can test to see if it supports our current aspirations as parents? If it does, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. We
Yeah.
can we can learn. Every day is a learning opportunity.
Yes, our life. I loved the metaphor you used that the bomb was landing in our life, and it's exactly how I felt. So we have to learn a lot, and both have to learn a lot, mother and father, and they also have to learn things together, how they
Hmm.
relate differently together, right? This is a big change for both of them. So how does the father-mother relationship impact aspirations of conscious parenting together?
Well, it's really foundational and fundamental. So sometimes when men are looking at this bouncing back, they're looking through the glass wrongly. They are imagining that the relationship they had is on hold, but and that same relationship's going to pick up in a few months once things settle down. It's like, no, your partner, she's been on her own journey. She went from maidenhood to motherhood. She is going to be transformed. This is the next version of herself.
Yeah.
And to the degree she is working out her own, mom's own thriving aspirations, she's going to be struggling. And how does she balance her previous self, her previous identity, her previous priorities with what's emerged here unpredictably? Like a transformational journey can never be predicted, it can only be experienced and metabolized. So she's figuring out what this new version of herself is, her new identity. You're figuring out yours. And therefore, the relationship is a new series of shared agreements, more consciously engaged with than simply a updating of an old software. Like this is a new reality. And so bringing awareness of that framework helps prevent people from falling into the trap of, I'm just going to reboot the system or we're going to go back to the way they were. And instead, as an opportunity, how can we create a better system? How can we move out of perhaps less constructive behaviors or mindsets or patterns that may have characterized our previous relationship?
Yeah.
And how can we be better both as individuals, but also as a family, especially as conscious fathers? We have a baby, our children, we have a relationship, but we also have an obligation to ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. So I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally losing the priority of honoring our sacred individuality, our own personal growth, our own aspirations. And what does this opportunity present to us to step up into fatherhood? This is a tremendous opportunity to be our best, better self for ourselves, but also for our partners and for our children as well.
Hmm. Hmm. What are common anxieties men are presenting you with in your setting of your coaching? So I heard, for instance, when we had a child, that my partner was, well, I'm so scared the baby doesn't like me. Baby likes you much better than me. So what are other anxieties men present you?
Well, that one you just mentioned is pretty common. There's so many men who report feeling like they're third wheel
Yeah.
in the relationship. And ideally, the more that they get in early and they get their skin to skin, they establish themselves as also primary caretaker versus, I'm going to stay out of the way. I'm going to let her do it. I don't know. I'm a
Mm.
little nervous. I'm scared. I'm anxious. Like, what do I do with this baby? I don't even know how to hold a baby. And it gets upset. And then after a minute or two, mama comes over and grabs baby because she's up uncomfortable with the fact that baby and I aren't bonding well, and they just get further and further away. And then all of a sudden that creates resentment from mama. Like, I'm doing everything. Every time you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And that's the relationship that's spiraling in the wrong direction. So ideally, they're getting in early and often and building those shared agreements with their partner. How are we going to do these things? And they're viewing themselves as primary caretaker also. and they're being encouraged and allowed by their partner to have their own learning experiences. Maybe it takes dad and baby a while to figure out what does soothing look like here, because it's going to be different than what does it soothing look like there. So there's a certain sort of space and grace that can go into the relationship for both partners to allow each other to be messy, to allow each other to be a little bit awkward as we're learning our roles, we're learning responsibilities and how to fulfill them, but we're also learning how to be responsible, not for each other, but to each other. How can we be mindful and aware of that our partner is their own person? Ideally, they're a empowered person that is fully capable of making their own decisions or living their best life. But how are we responding to them in moments of challenge? And it's not about fixing. And this is where a lot of guys get stuck. I want to fix. I want to fix. I'm not doing, it's not working. I'm getting frustrated. She's getting frustrated. So I back off and I shut down. And that's creating that distance.
Yeah.
So rather than thinking you're responsible for your partner's well being, you're responsible to your partner and helping her feel supported and connected and being in that collaborative space for constructive, bouncing forward looking conversations. You are responsible for your baby. Like you
Mhm.
need to be responsible for your baby, but you're responsible to your partner. And that's a different, difficult dynamic for people to tease out. So sometimes, especially guys are sort of overwhelmed in that birth space and feeling burdened by obligations and responsibilities and expectations. They're not engaging those challenges with curiosity, and they're not taking ownership of the choices that they could make if they decided to pivot out of being challenged and making a choice and owning their power as an agent, as a dad, as a father, and that showing up as a leader in the relationship. And we can maybe get into that in a minute here, but that leadership is partnership. And so encouraging this step up and, okay, I don't know how to soothe my baby, but dang it, we're going to figure it out. I don't know the best way to do this, but I'm going to own my challenge and show up with curiosity and invite my partner to share what works for her. And I'm going to try that. And we're going to work on this together. So again, there's a lot of, it's hard to compact all this down, but that taking ownership and seeing responsibility to versus for, and then being a leader in this relationship, not the leader of, you're not the boss, but
No.
you're a leader in, which means
Yes.
owning your opportunity.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to well, to touch on right now. So evolution hates redundancy, as we saw already. So the roles are not identical. Mom and dad's role are not identical.
Hmm.
Mom's role is quite constrained. She is responsible for actually for childbirth, breastfeeding, and caregiving. Although men are also similar, is men are also caregivers. Both are caregivers in some to some extent. So, what is, in your opinion, the different role of a father?
So I think one of the bigger challenges with that question is that so much of this comes down to the specific relationship dynamics
Mhm.
of the couple. For
Yeah,
example, when we were having our baby, I work from home with my consulting coaching business. My wife is a pediatric nurse practitioner. She works outside the house. And
yeah.
so I was the at-home parent, and we had some au pair assistants and different nannies kind of help also. So I had my free time to work. But at the same time, I was mostly present with our babies after we had our maternity leave, which is woefully short here in the US. She was lucky to get 3 months, but after that, she was at work all day. And so for us, that role would be different than a different couple, our neighbors, who the mom had her baby and elected to not return to the workforce, and her husband had to work a little bit more, so he was out of the house like 14 hours a day, so she was home by herself with her baby all day. So the specifics of my relationship with my partner and my baby were very different than his with
Mhm.
his partner and her baby. But the underlying challenge is how do we collaborate together, and how are we going to work together to articulate what our relationship as parents is going to look like? How are we going to bounce forward here in our unique circumstances? And how is that different than other couples? But those differences aside, the deeper challenge for men in particular is they tend to sort of miss in one of two ways. And I call this in my work the dud zones. Missing one way is they basically give up their individuality and they're like, I'm going to be the best partner and parent ever. And they just park everything that was their own sacred individuality and they lose touch with that. And
Yes.
those are the ones that are constantly burdened with responsibilities and obligations because there's a saying here in the US, you can't pour from an empty cup. So they're constantly giving and they turn themselves into like basically like support droids. They're like, oh, whatever you need. And they end up like reacting constantly to any perceived challenge, emotional, physical, otherwise, from mama and baby. And frankly, their partners don't want that. Their partner doesn't want somebody who's always waiting to be bossed around or told what to do. That's not a leader in the relationship. That's like a servant. And their partner doesn't want a servant as a partner. She wants a partner. She wants a co-pilot, a co-leader. Some guys miss that way. I call that wimpy town. Again, my language is pretty colloquial, pretty US based, kind of folksy. But some guys miss the other way. They're like, I'm not having a baby. You're the mom. You take care of the baby. I'm not doing diapers. I'm not caretaking. I'm not comforting. I need to sleep because I got to go to work. You stay awake all night with baby. You deal with baby. It was your idea. I'm the dad. I'm going to go be the, quote unquote traditional dad. I'm going to go to work and make money and put a roof over heads and you figure out how to run it on the inside. And
Yeah.
those guys are missing the other way. That's what I call Jerkville. They're like all about their sacred individuality. They're really working hard to preserve those dude zone activities. Like I'm going to the pub, I'm going to the games, I'm seeing my buddies, I'm doing all the things, and I am not losing touch with what I feel is mine. You can do the parenting, you can do the mothering of the baby while I do my things as an outward facing dad. And those guys are missing also. That's what I call Jerkville. So what's that balance of connecting with your sacred individuality, bringing some of these things from the dude zone with you to the dad zone, but also doing that in a way that you're connecting with your partner. You're creating that new relationship. You're fostering a new shared awareness, a shared consciousness of
Yes.
what does it mean for us as a couple now that we're parents? Where do we want to go? How do we want to parent our baby? What do we want to do for medical care or schooling or food or all of these things that are best arrived at through a collaborative conversation, but then are arrived at and the arrival is a shared agreement. We're going to do these things. So that creates that trust. That creates that bond of connection. That creates that unifying sense of who we are while
Yeah.
still preserving a very active and healthy differentiation of I'm not you. I like yoga. You like weights. I like bicycling. You like running. I like steak. You like sushi. And that's encouraged and celebrated and fostered as well. So you're growing as an individual and growing in the relationship and growing the relationships as parent and partner as well. That's what thriving really looks like. That's dad zone thriving. And it's more conscious awareness and more conscious engagement that are really combined together to create that conscious fatherhood goal that is dad zone thriving.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. And you talked about the connection between yourself, which is totally different when you have a child. The connection to a mother or your partner is different. But what do fathers do different than mothers do with regard to children? In what way do you see that fathers play a different role in the life of their children?
Well, the key word there that I like to keep track of is play. So sometimes we hear about fatherhood as like, oh, you're going to be a dad now. It's like it's serious and it's somber. And it's like, okay, well, that's one way, but why don't we bring sincere in where there's a depth of feeling, but it's not a curtailing, it's not a negative, it's not serious, it's sincere. Sincere feels more open, engaged versus serious, which is like pipe down over there. So be sincere, treat it as the sacred opportunity for your own personal growth, your relationship growth, and the role you're going to have in the life of this child as their father. One of the two most important roles ever and perpetually. You're always going to be a dad to this baby. When they're 50 and you're 80, you're still the father. So understand this sincerity and the sacredness, but then bring that humor in. As we mentioned earlier in this talk, those oxytocin loops of felt visceral connection engagement for a lot of men come out through play. So even when your baby is 3 months and they're not playing, I warn guys, you're going to have to wait till 9 months till you actually feel like the other person's playing, like your baby's playing with you. But even as a 3 month old, one of the things that my wife and I had a very big difference on is we had a baby carrier, which I love, highly recommend 100%.
Yeah.
But she would wear the baby facing in so she could look down and see him. I would wear him facing out because he and I are we're engaging the world. And I would hold my fingers like this, and he would have his little hands on my fingers, like, and I would pretend I was riding a motorcycle. I'd like rev my finger and and make sounds and be steering around. So assuming he was equally happy to be facing in or out, by having him facing out, I was able to make this a play activity where I was feeling connected with my baby as I'm doing this game. Even if he was sleeping and he still my fingers, I would still be playing my little game of like steering around through the store or whatever. So that helped me foster my own bonds of connection with my children. I do it with both my son and my daughter. And then that play, that humor, that balance approach, like changing diapers can be a game. Everything can be gamified to make it more enjoyable. And
Yes.
it doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously, if the baby's in distress, you're not playing a game at that point. So if the baby's upset, stop what you're doing and calm down. But to the degree that the baby is fine and you're moving their legs into funny ways and making sounds while you're changing diapers, or you're playing games and you're like spinning them around and playing, and you know, babies like that. They will go to,
Yes.
as they get older, 9-month olds that are crawling will crawl to dad when they want fun. Again, I'm speaking generality here, but they will tend to crawl to dad for fun. And if they get hurt accidentally, then they'll crawl to mom for comfort. And it's okay to have different skills and aptitudes and interests. And again, they need to be engaged and supported and encouraged. Fathers don't mother and mothers don't father. But then also there need to be those shared agreements about, okay, well, it's almost bedtime. Maybe this isn't the time to start playing with baby and being all crazy if they're getting ready to fall asleep. Like, what's the way we want to handle this at 7 p.m. versus 3 in the afternoon? So again, those shared agreements create the safety structure to allow more freedom. It's a liberating agreement that creates more freedom, and it's an iterative process. This is that conscious engagement of continually being more conscious to have stronger bonds of connection and greater degrees of freedom.
Yeah, you just, it's perfectly tied into what also Anna Metchin says. I just want to read out what she says about the different role of the father. She said, well, dad's role is more flexible. He has to maneuver their way through the complexities of social life. So he role models empathy, sharing, caring, helping, mental resistance through challenging. And actually, man in their play, and that's what you mentioned, play and humor, they scaffold the child's entry into the world beyond the family. What do you say about this? How does this land in you?
Oh, I love that. And one of the things that I'll speak to here, and this is where sometimes, you know, moms will feel some resistance, is when dads are playing with their children, they're tickling, and it's a little bit rougher than moms are comfortable with.
Yes,
They feel that the dad is overriding the child's preferences. And you know, at times, if you're tickling the child and they're crying, that you need to stop. So there's a certain range where that's more true. But also, what this rough play does is it cultivates the child's empathy of like, what does it look like to play and roughhouse, and what is too far and what's not too far? When does physical activity start to drift out of fun and into maybe not? And that empathy and that awareness and that shared appreciation of where these boundaries may be more or less fluid, that can only come about when they're being challenged by accidentally going too far. When you know the kid like pinches you and you're like, "Oh, that really hurt," and then they're like, "Oh, that was too much." Or when you're tickling them and they say stop, and then you stop, they learn the importance of cultivating their own voice and asserting themselves for healthy boundaries. Like all of these things that are so much more applicable in the real world are developed through that sort of boundary testing and
exactly.
connecting with a trusted mentor, in this case, the father, the one who's often leading this aspect of the journey of growth and discovery.
Yes, yes. Well, when young fathers, or I'm not sure what is the typical father who comes to you. Is it more a father of a young child or a father of a teenager child?
Mostly I connecting with men who are early in the journey. So ideally, and I say my perfect guy just saw the positive pregnancy test yesterday and he was like, I want to get ahead of all this stuff, David. So let's start working together now. So that's the ideal state. And as an ideal state, it's rarely what actually happens. Most often I'm connecting with men in that first year when they've been winging it, they've been guessing, they've been struggling, and you know that there we're all able to sort of like suck it up for a period of time and just bear the slings and arrows of perpetual challenges. So, but at some point we have enough. And unfortunately, our culture really has done a terrible job of supporting men early in fatherhood that are struggling. As so many guys tell me, David, this is the first, you are the first person I've talked to who doesn't counter with I'm saying with, well, what about your partner? She had a baby, you didn't. How is she doing? It's like, I'm just trying to talk about how I'm doing. Can we focus on me for a minute? And can I be allowed to be messy? Can I be allowed to be vulnerable? Can I be allowed to frankly share where I'm frustrated, where I'm struggling, and why I feel the way I feel without the conversation immediately pivoting over to what my partner's doing and how is she doing? It's like, this is a place, like I am a place what's safe for them to be, as I say, a human and having your emotional challenges and your struggles and encountering the unfair, unexpressed social cultural expectations, or to the degree some of them are expressed, you know, dad, you need to suck it up. You need to go to work, not get fired, do a good job, get promoted, bring home more money, come home, tag in, do half of everything, if not more. She had a baby, you didn't, as like the perpetual, like, whatever you have to say, this wins. This is the trump card. This is the ace. It beats whatever you may play. And men are tired of that. They want a place to be supported, but then challenged. And how can they, every man who I speak with, they want to do better. Like that's why they're showing up. I want to be better at this. I want to be more successful. I want to do all the things. I want to be a great protector. I want to be a great provider. I want to be a great partner. I want to be a great dad. But I'm just guessing and guessing wrong, and I'm not getting any support. I'm not getting help. My poor partner, she doesn't know. No matter what I do, it's not right. Well, she doesn't know either. So she's just reacting to you. You're reacting to her. It's again, it's a bad spiral. So helping them spiral, stop the downward spiral, and start to scaffold up, as we've talked about, through getting more awareness of the terrain they're in, more awareness of what is their sacred individuality versus dude's own habits that are should be shed. What is the bouncing forward look like? And then how to have those constructive, collaborative conversations with their friends, with their partner, with
Mhm.
the therapist if needed. Who knows who's in your network that you can have bouncing forward type conversations with. And
Yeah,
often the guys that are connecting that first year, that's where they really need that acknowledgement, that allowance, and then that slow but gradual persistent support as they build that scaffolding into the dad zone and how to establish a life that feels like thriving, that feels good for them and is recognized as good by the world around them.
exactly. Just men are also human beings, and
Newsflash, right?
sometimes the world forgets that men are also human beings, and it's so great. I see so many men thriving and really seeking out help and looking for help, which is a great thing, right? So when, let's say 60 years ago, when my father became a father, he would not have necessarily taken one of your courses,
hmm
right? What are the reasons, in your opinion, that we have so many challenges, or men are challenged the way they are challenged?
Well, I'd say first the good news that I'm seeing so many of these things shifting in our larger culture. Um, so I'm going to speak to my experience when I was first becoming a dad 8 years ago and how that was not helpful and how I've seen it shift here. So, you know, as you mentioned, when your father became a father half a century ago, so did my dad. And when I was born, he was not allowed in the delivery room. He was only allowed to hold me for 30 minutes a day under the timed supervision of a nurse. And this was when my mom was in the ICU because she had some birth complications and she almost died. So she was in the ICU for a week. So I would be wheeled in to breastfeed on her. And then I could be held by my dad for 30 minutes a day under the nurse supervision. So that was what was offered in the sense of this is all you can do. No matter what your aspirations are, this is all you can do. So that any interest or engagement from, you know, fathers back in the day was was curtailed and cut off by the culture. Like all the TV shows, you're out in the waiting room passing out cigars when they told it's a boy or a girl or whatever that is. It's just these bad stereotypes are unhelpful. So when I was coming into fatherhood, again, I became a dad later in my life. I was 43 when my first was born. So I had the virtue of having more wisdom, but the the deficit of less energy. My younger sister has two girls that are in college now, and she would always remind me of how I used to tease her for never going out when she had her children back in when she was in her 20s. and we joke about what would be better to have more energy or more wisdom. And,
Yes.
we each think the other would have been better. So, but now I think that cultural framework of what does it mean to be, what does healthy masculine look like? That conversation is finally being encouraged, and it's not being answered with be more feminine, because there used to be, you couldn't even say the word masculine unless you preface it with toxic. And there
Yes.
wasn't an awareness that men have, there wasn't awareness appreciation that healthy masculine doesn't mean just be more feminine. It's a, what does it mean to really be authentically masculine in a healthy expression, and being invited to at least think about things that way. Again, the consciousness full circle here, bringing awareness of this healthy masculine. What does it look like? And then bringing the aspiration of, I want to be more like that we all have as men. But if it's not articulated well, or we don't see good cultural examples, then it's like, well, does healthy masculine mean being like, some old Clint Eastwood movie? Or does it mean I'm supposed to be a stoic and be the rock and not have an emotional inner existence and just be present and available for my partner for whatever she needs? Because where am I in that conversation? If you would need a rock, I'll give you a rock, but that's not me. I have my own inner life that is rich and important. So then you have that awareness, you have that aspiration, and then that engagement. What does it mean to show up as a more healthy masculine version of myself than I did yesterday? Because it's never perfect. It's never a destination. It's a journey. And that's where that sort of like bouncing forward, that constructive collaboration, that honoring and anchoring in our sacred individuality as who we are as individuals, but as men, and then that aspiration to show up for ourselves and in relationships as that healthier, more grounded, more expressive, healthy masculine version of ourselves. And again, it's gonna be different for each guy, but that the trajectory, those trajectories should start to align when we get more of a shared awareness of what does healthy masculine look like, and what are the steps we can take to embody it better in our lives and in our relationships with our partner and with our baby as well.
Exactly. Exactly. In this sense, we all come, well, I guess we are all more moving towards our humanness and our
Mhm.
force and our strength. So I think it's not that important anymore to show the same masculinity my father was needed to show, right? So I think you're right. We came a long way already, and we have to really make ourselves alert and should honor the way the trajectory we already walked, right? So
Mhm.
when the guys are doing a program with you, right? The men are coming to do a coaching program. What does success look like for them in reality? What do you see in them when they have finished their program? Or
So the that
what do they say when they have finished your program?
well, it really comes down to their own evaluation of how they feel about how they're showing up for themselves
Mhm.
and how they're showing up in the world and in their most important relationships with their partner. And then as a father, again, with it's a new baby, you're not going to get your baby's not going to give you a good, 6-month review feedback form of how you're doing as a dad. So we're gonna bracket that for now, but it's much more about anchoring their evaluation of themselves within their own framework. But that framework is informed by an iterative conversation with the world around them. So they feel good about how they're honoring their sacred individuality. They're tracking their personal growth. They're investing time, effort, energy, money, whatever it may be, in their meditation, their yoga, their outdoor exposure, their walk, their diet, their fitness, their mental health, their spiritual health, their emotional health. They're staying grounded and connected and rooted in that. But then their branches, their growth, their offerings to the world are coming out through and in their relationships, be it a career relationship with their coworkers, but most importantly, their relationship with their partner.
Mm.
The guys that come back, the guys who are working the program, and program's a loose term. It's not a prescription program. It's an ongoing conversation because everybody's different.
Yeah.
But the guys who are feeling successful are being successful. They're turning that relationship into one that is a conversation. It is a collaboration. It is a constructive bouncing forward. And they're showing up in the relationship, not with resentment and frustration, but with curiosity and appreciation and with gratitude, with engagement, with, a true engagement is when you kind of wake up in the morning and you're excited about what lies in front of you versus wake up in the morning and dreading what lies in front of you. So the guys that are succeeding are looking at what lies in front of them with excitement, both in their personal life and their sacred individuality, but in their relationship life and their connection with their partner, with their baby, and with the world around them. So truly thriving in the dad zone. Those are the guys that you see him. You see him from across the room. You see him and like, wow, that guy's got a pep in his step. He's got a sparkle in his eye. He's got charisma. He's grounded and present, and he's not all buffoonery and fluff or a restricted shell. He's attentive and present with this baby. He's wearing his baby, and they're smiling and they're talking. He's not just over in the corner like watching the stroller while his partner's doing this. Like he's embodying that thriving energy from a grounded authenticity and an expressive engagement. So that's what this success looks like. That's my goal for all my guys. It's like, I don't know what the details of your life are, but this is how I want you to feel when you show up in those details, engaged and excited and anticipating ways, what's next and how can I show up here in a way to help everybody be more successful. That's the guy that's thriving in the dad zone.
That's so wonderful. I really like to hear that. And you can spot all those men in the streets who is one of those who had done your coaching program and who had support and who didn't, who would need that. Well, I would like to take the opportunity here to thank you very much for all you have offered today and for all your wisdom you shared with us. Um, David, where can people find you online and what are some upcoming offerings, programs, or events you would like to share with us today?
Sure. So thank you very much. Again, it's been a great opportunity to connect with you and talk about conscious fatherhood. It's a passion of mine. As you can see, I'm engaged when I'm talking about it. This is me thriving, is sharing the importance of what does it mean to be a conscious father for those around me. For anybody out in the world, it's www.welcometofatherhood.com. It's all one word. You can email me directly, david@welcometofatherhood.com. I respond to my emails, so it's actually me. It's not just a bot or an assistant. I have my book, the Welcome to Father book, that's available in all the formats. You can get a e-version through my website directly, or you can go to Amazon or Audible and get that there. All these links will be in the notes here. Then I have a new video course that I finally put together with all my Welcome to Fatherhood dad tips and big ideas, all the things I talk about, and a really easy to work through video course. It's like the videos are like 3 to 6 minutes. There's a couple longer ones in there for a more complex topic. It's all organized by trimester. And then that fourth trimester of fatherhood is the biggest chunk. Like half of it is now that you're a dad, this is what's relevant. And there's coaching that's always available separately, but then the video course has some coaching packages where you can get like a bundle to help save money and also to show your partner you're doing a good job because you got the book, you got the course, you got coaching, you're all in because she's going to want to know what are you doing to get ready to be a dad. And then for your audience, I'll share a discount code I want to make available. It's just Conscious 30, all capital letters, one word, CONSCIOUS 30. Enter that at checkout and you get 30% off any of the things that you're getting. And I'll leave that up for a long time to make sure whenever somebody is coming across this conversation that yes, the discount still applies to you today. I invite any questions, comments. I'm a co-host of a podcast out there called Baby Talk with Katie and David. My co-host Katie's a lactation consultant. So she and I share the mom, dad side of what is childbirth, early parenthood, challenges, opportunities, expectations. So that's on all your podcast platforms. I have Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not really active there. So your best bet is to just contact me directly at david@welcometofather.com or just go to the website and see everything on there is live, current, and updated and correct.
Well, thank you very much, David. I love your work. I can't express how much I love your work. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm so grateful we had this conversation. All the
Thank you,
best.
Corinne. My pleasure.